which is not near as good quality, but there it is. This is for my 0 hour that missed today. Hopefully they are watching. Huh? You think? I have 5 honors. Okay. We're on page 74. So let's look at the leadership again real quick, okay? And we're talking about the House. So we're in the bottom half of the page. Of course, you have the Speaker, and I've told you about the Speaker and how much power he has. Your majority leader is of the majority party, so he's a Republican. His name is Steve Scalise of Louisiana. His kind of claim to fame is he got shot. Now, every year, Congress plays a baseball game against each other. Republicans versus the Democrats. Every year. I watched that. And about 5 years ago, the Republicans were practicing in Alexandria, Virginia, outside of D.C., and a crazed man who hated Republicans brought a gun to the practice and started shooting. Now, thankfully, there was a Capitol Police officer there that was able to take down the shooter, but not before Steve Scalise suffered gunshot wounds. No, he's still alive, and he is the House Majority Leader. Okay, what does this person do? He's a legislative strategist. So the Speaker wants to get something through. So he's the right-hand man of the Speaker, if that makes sense, and number 2 in leadership in the House. So if Mike Johnson loses his race or something like that, Steve Scalise might become the new Speaker, okay? Then you have the minority leader. This is the most powerful person of the Democrats in the House. That today, of course, is Hakeem Jeffries. As you can see in your book, he is from New York. And then you have your whips, which I described for you the other day. These are people that count votes. Like the Speaker wants to know how many votes they have, or they twist arms, or whip members into shape, if you will. Okay? Now, former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, was really good at this. Keeping the Democrats together, voting in bloc, in mass, together. Republicans have a harder time with this. Okay? I think I mentioned this term to you the other day, the Freedom Caucus. So within Congress, you have these different groups that meet together, like the African American Caucus in the House, which is made up of African American members of the House. Now, there are more Democratic African Americans than Republicans. Sometimes the Republicans don't get to play or invited to the Congressional Black Caucus. That's what it's called, the Congressional Black Caucus. Okay. Sometimes Tim Scott, South Carolina, conservative, he's not invited because he doesn't have the right ideology. So anyhow, that's what whips do. They use their muscle. They try to muscle votes. And then another important position in Congress is the committee chairs. Now, I mentioned this to you before. Now, let's say this is a committee hearing room. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay. 9 of them are Republicans. 8 of them are Democrats. The chairman in the House is going to be a Republican. The chairman of every committee in the Senate is going to be a Democrat. They are like many dictators of their committees. So if I introduce a bill and it gets referred to a committee, and the committee chairman looks at this bill and he says, I don't think so. And he sticks it over on his desk, and we call this a what? A pigeonhole. So every committee chairman has the power to basically veto a bill before it sees the light of day. Does that make sense? Always of the majority party, okay? Usually based on seniority. So if you've been on that committee for a long time, you may at some point become the chair of that committee. Some of the committees, they hold elections, and some of them have term limits for how long you can be the chair of that committee. So you're not the chairman of that committee for 24 years. And nothing ever gets there that this chair doesn't want. Okay. Good? Understand the leadership of the House. Okay, let's move over to the Senate. Okay. Senate terms, 6 years. There's 2 from each state, 50 states, we got 100. Simple stuff, right? Now, as I mentioned the other day, only 1/3 of the Senate is up for election every 2 years. So 2024, 33, 26, 33, 28, 34. You understand that? Okay. Now, unlike the House, you got to be a little older. So 25 for the House, 30 for the Senate, 35 for the President. Correct? Okay. You must be 9 years a citizen and live in the state that you represent. Now, we recently had a senator from Kansas named Pat Roberts, who's retired. Roger Marshall took his seat. Okay. In his last campaign for re-election, Pat Roberts was criticized for not living in Kansas. He had an address at a friend's house, but he had a house in Virginia. His kids went to school in Virginia. He mainly lived in Virginia, but had an address in Kansas. I told you this story. I don't like that. I think that's cheesy. You know what I mean? Now, one thing I respect about Senator Jerry Moran, who lives in Hayes, is that he comes home almost every weekend. He doesn't live in D.C. or Virginia. Okay? He lives in Hayes. Now, if you know anything about flying in Kansas, you can't take a direct flight from Hayes to D.C. So you're going to fly into Kansas City or Wichita and drive to Hayes. This takes effort. Yes? Okay. So I respect that out of Jerry Moran. And by the way, there's very few direct flights from Wichita to D.C. Sometimes you got to fly through Chicago or Atlanta or Houston or Dallas or St. Louis. Okay. It's a pain in the neck flying out of Wichita. Okay. Kansas City's a little better, but not that much better. Still kind of small airports.
Do they fund his transport home?
That is paid for. They have a budget for that. Yeah.
They just use
Page 73. Yeah.
Well, they just use the private one.
You know how expensive that is?
Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
they're paying for it.
Now, some of your more wealthy members might take some private transportation. Sometimes you can catch a ride. If you live in a district that has a military base, sometimes you can catch a ride on a military flight, say to McConnell or something like that. Okay. Members of Congress do that from time to time. Hitch a ride. Okay. Leadership in the Senate. The president of the Senate is the vice president, correct? Sorry, my notes are wrong here. Of course, you need to update that. Kamala Harris is the president of the Senate. Okay. Now, the only time the vice president votes is if there's a tie. Otherwise, they don't vote. Okay. Now, they can preside over the Senate as much or as little as they want. They don't have to. I think I probably told you the story of John Adams, who was the first vice president. They had 13 senators, right? The first Senate. So John Adams shows up at the Senate, and he's going to be in charge, he thinks. Okay. And they're like, John, we don't need you. We'll let you know if there's a tie. you can go away. When you will see the vice president is on January 6th, when they count the Electoral College votes officially in front of the Senate. Okay. Now, this can be an awkward thing, as it was for Mike Pence, because he was the vice president and his ticket lost. So he has to read the votes of him losing. Al Gore had to do the same thing in 2000. He was the candidate and the vice president. Pence was still running for vice president, but Gore was running for president as vice president. And he had to count the votes of himself losing, which I will say, Al Gore handled with grace. And I think a lot of people praise Mike Pence for how he handled January 6th. Okay, so you have that. They are not the equivalent of the speaker when it comes to power. That power lies with the Senate Majority Leader, not the Senate President pro tempore. Now, let me spell that out for you. Okay, so it's Senate President pro tempore. Now, I think I've talked about this position before. This is the longest serving member of the majority party in the Senate. And that position resides with Patty Murray, as you look on page 74. So she's been in the Senate longer than any other Democrat. Does that make sense? It's a ceremonial position. It doesn't come with a lot of power. So when you talk about making decisions in the Senate, you're not talking to Patty Murray. Okay? You're talking to Chuck Schumer. Okay? The majority leader. The majority leader in the Senate is the equivalent of the Speaker of the House in the Senate. So Chuck is the one that has the power. Okay? But because the rules are different in the Senate, Chuck doesn't have quite as much power as Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson? Mike Johnson. Okay. I got a friend, close friend of mine named Mark Johnson. So sometimes I do. I was calling him Ron Johnson the other day. Where I got Ron. It's Mike Johnson. Okay. Now, so Chuck Schumer, is the equivalent Speaker of the Senate Majority. Senate Minority Leader, our wonderful Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. Okay. Any guys seen any video of Mitch McConnell having the brain freeze incidents? Man, that is hard to watch. Guy's mid-sentence doing a press conference and just freezes. It's like, dude, it's time to go home and spend time with your grandkids. Let's go, man. Come on. Okay, now, Mitch McConnell has been in the Senate forever, okay? And he knows the rules better than anybody in the Senate, okay? And so he's been a very effective Senate Majority Leader when he was in the majority. Now he's the minority leader, okay? So coming in behind Mitch McConnell, the next guy in power for the Republicans is John Thune, okay, of South Dakota. Okay, so he would be the next likely. Say the Republicans win control of the Senate in this next election. Look for John Thune to be the Senate Majority Leader, possibly. They'll have elections, but usually they just kind of move up to the next position. Okay. Their job is basically to obstruct the majority. The minority's job is to obstruct the majority. Okay. Keep their party together. Okay. And then your whips. Okay. That you have in both the House and the Senate. Okay. Good? All right. So let's do a little review of powers of Congress and bring up some kind of new things that we haven't talked about that are just kind of interesting that I threw in the notes. And let's talk about express powers. Everybody remembers what express powers are. That means it's written where? It's written in the Constitution. It's not implied. It's not inherent. It's expressed. Yeah.
So, like, all these leadership positions aren't in the Constitution because parties aren't in the.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so they're just.
They were created over time.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Good question. Yes.
How do you become the majority of the House?
You're elected by your caucus. Now, as we found out when Mitch McConnell became Speaker, not Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, who lost his job, they went through like 3 speakers in a few days or something like that. They had like 100 votes. So when you vote for Speaker of the House, the Democrats get the vote too. Okay, so if you don't have all the Republicans on board, you could conceivably elect a Democratic Speaker of the House with a House majority of Republicans. Does that make sense? They all get to vote for Speaker. Usually, the minority party is going to wind up second. But if your caucus is divided, as it was with the Republicans in the last year or so, you may not get enough votes. Okay, and that happened. I think they voted for Speaker like 100 times, which was a record. Or we haven't had that in 100 years. Okay, and now they got rid of McCarthy. They got Mike Johnson, and now some of the Republican Freedom Caucus is upset with Mike Johnson because they just passed a $1.1 trillion spending bill. And they're like, yo, Mike, what are we doing here? Okay, we're going to replace you.
It's like a while.
McCarthy's a few months ago. This book was printed. This book was printed right after Christmas. No, that's Senator Joseph McCarthy. Talk about Mike McCarthy of California. McCarthy of Wisconsin. All right.
Evan McCarthy or Mike McCarthy?
Kevin McCarthy. Sorry. What is today? Tuesday? Yeah. See, I don't even know what day it is, guys. I'm just hanging by the seat of my pants right now. Really, I am. Okay. One thing to the next. I'm trying to answer emails. I got my first parent email from a baseball player a few minutes ago. And it's really got me flustered. I mean, somebody's not happy.
Playing time?
Could be. The kid played last night. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Okay. But anyhow, income tax. Talking about the power to tax. Okay. Now, the 16th Amendment is in the Constitution. Yes, it's expressed that you can tax incomes. But we've got all these other taxes. So let's list a few. Excise tax is your sin tax. Yes, on tobacco, alcohol, that sort of thing. Tariffs, tax on imports. Cannot tax exports. That's expressed in the Constitution. You cannot tax exports. Inheritance tax, which some people call the what? Death tax or the estate tax. Capital gains tax was a tax on what? Could be stocks. Huh? On utilized gains. Yes. So like if you're flipping houses for a living, you invest in a house. Huh? But yeah, stocks too. Like if you sell stock.
Although, if you do a house, couldn't you like transfer that into another property?
Okay, here's the rules. Okay, you have to live in that house for 5 years. Now, the first time you do it, you get a freebie. Okay, so you can buy a house, fix it up, sell it. You don't get capital gains on it, as long as you reinvest that money into another house. Okay, now the second time, it becomes a business, and it's a capital gain, and you have to pay. Now, capital gains tax right now, I believe, is 21%. Somebody want to look that up for me real quick? It used to be 28. I think Trump lowered it. Somebody looking that up? What's capital gains tax rate? Now, it may be progressive, so. What?
Short term?
Yeah.
Yeah, it says 10 to 37.
10,
Long
okay.
term is 15 to 20.
Okay.
Depends on the short term. Right.
It depends on your income as well. Yes. Depends on your income. So if you're rich, capital gains rate is higher. If you're not rich, it's lower. Who determines what rich is? Congress. Okay. Now, what other kind of taxes, Liam?
Income, property tax.
State income tax, property taxes, sales taxes.
You get absolutely shafted this year with your property tax.
Dude, who isn't?
It's wild.
I was listening. I heard something like some lady. Theirs went up like I forget where she lived. Is it Kansas City?
Ours is going up 100,000 every year, and we litigate it every year. And get it at least.
You get it reduced?
Yeah.
Yeah. So guys, the average American pays about 40% of what they make in taxes. There's gas tax. Okay. There's all kinds of taxes you don't even realize that you're paying on certain bills and so forth. Okay. So, taxes. All right. Copyright. What type of things are copyrighted? Well, books, lyrics, drama, painting, sculpture, pictures, internet, music, etc. Now, if you get a copyright for these, it lasts for your life, plus 70 years after you die. So you can pass that on to your family, or you can sell your copyright. Okay? I think it's Paul McCartney that bought the copyright to Michael Jackson's music catalog. Okay? Hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay? I think McCartney owns the Beatles copyright stuff as well. He bought the other guys out, ones that are still alive, which is just what? Ringo? Harrison died and Lennon died. Yeah. So Ringo Starr got bought out by McCartney, who's very rich and a hell of a musician. Huh? Yeah. The Rolling Stones, man, they're still going a little bit too. He's like 80. Mick Jagger. Okay. Okay. Patents. These are like inventions, right? You invent the mouse. Because what?
Like someone.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that whole thing was messed up. So the hula hoop. Okay. The frisbee. You invent that. You're the only one that can make it for 20 years. After 20 years, you get the knockoffs. When you talk about drugs, prescription drugs, Congress addressed this a few years ago, and they changed the patent date on drugs to 7 years. So do you guys take like Claritin or allergy meds? Okay. Because I was on Claritin back when you had to get a prescription. Okay. And then there was no knockoff. So it was expensive. I built up a resistance to Claritin. It didn't really work for me after a few years. And so then the patent went, and now you can buy the knockoffs. Like Zyrtec, I buy the Walgreens or Dillon's brand Zyrtec for my allergies. And it works pretty good. Okay. So should they be even allowed to have patents for medicines like this and so forth?
Think about how much money it takes for R&D though. Testing.
Okay. So, and people spend a lot of time doing that R&D, don't they? Spend a lot of money and time. Would people spend that money and time if they couldn't make money off of it? Probably not. Okay. There's your profit motive. And if you came up with a pill that would kill every kind of cancer in your body, how much money could you make?
A lot.
Okay.
It's low-key really like risky too, because what if during R&D like got something kills and then you have a lawsuit and things like that? There's little bit of profit. Why are you gonna mess with that?
There's a lot of factors. Yes. Bring up some good ones, Liam. Yeah. Now, so guys, you got to be allowed to make money on that. Okay. But Congress has said 7 years is enough money. Okay. Eminent domain. This is a fun subject for people. You guys familiar with K96? So if you wanted to go from Goddard to Cabela's, northeast Wichita, you can go two different ways, right? You got to take Kellogg all the way into K96, which you could take, you can get a 235 around to K96, right? Or you could take Kellogg all the way to Greenwich and go north. Yes? Well, they're talking about extending K96 around, you know how it goes up the Maze, down around to Goddard. So you could take a northern loop around Wichita. Okay? You're going to have to buy up some farmland to build that road. The government can use eminent domain to force you to sell that land for the public interest. Just like when we built the Transcontinental Railroad. That's going to go through some people's property. Eminent domain allows that. Now, in 2005, guys, a very important decision by the Supreme Court called the Kelo decision. Kelo versus the city of New London, Connecticut. It's about a little pink house. Now, John Cougar Mellencamp sang a song called Pink House. This was a great song, but it's not about this pink house. This pink house was owned by a woman in New London, Connecticut. It was on the water, but it was kind of in an old area. It was kind of an industrial rundown area of the city. Little pink house that she used as a B&B. It's a B&B. Bed and breakfast. Okay, so it's her business. And the city wanted to do like a revitalization effort and clean up that part of the town. And so they forced her to sell. She's like, this is not what eminent domain was meant to be. So she sued. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. What Supreme Court said is if it is in the general benefit of the community or will encourage economic growth in the community, they can force you to sell your land. So when they put up Intrust Bank Arena downtown, they forced some people to sell. When Wichita 259 passed the bond to put turf fields on turf fields at the schools, build new tracks and new gymnasiums, at North High, they thought they could get these houses along the street there of North High to sell, and they would use that land. Well, that didn't work out for them. Okay, I don't know why they didn't get them to sell it, but for a while there, North High didn't have baseball and softball fields to practice on because they built the gym on top of it. Okay, so for 1-2 years there, I told the North High coach, listen, you guys can come over and practice at Carroll on Saturdays when we're done. You know, and they have a hard time getting everybody over here on a Saturday, kids without cars and stuff like that. So anyhow, so Kelo, which I remember when I heard this decision, I was pretty pissed. Okay, I was like, this is wrong. Now let me give you some examples and you can tell me whether it's wrong or not. All right. Any guys ever been to the beach? What beach? Destin? You've been to Destin. Destin. Okay, let's stay with Destin. Okay, this is the beach right here. And on that beach, they had these big things. What are these big things? Oh, it's a big building.
Oh, it's a big building.
Condos.
Condominiums on the water. Did you not stay in one of these? I did. I do. We rent a condo. You're on the 14th floor. You take the elevator down. You walk out the back, and you're on the beach. Now, there's 200 units in this one. There's 150 units in this one. There's 150 in this one. There's 100 in this one. And then there's Grandpa's cinder block house that he built back in the 40s. Little beach house. Sitting right there in between all these big condos. Now, each one of these condos at Destin's going to run you about $400,000, like a house. Okay? If you want to buy a condo. So you got 200 people paying property taxes on $400,000. Now, what are property taxes used to pay for mostly? Infrastructure. Schools are funded a lot by property taxes. Yes? They are. Okay?
You told me you're getting a beachside condo in Destin.
Yeah, I don't.
Maybe not. Well, Perdido Key, where I hang out, 300, 350. Like a one bedroom.
Jog off.
Yeah, dude, I go on Zillow all the time. I'm ready. I'm tired of grading freaking papers.
Amen.
Okay?
Which is exactly why you should move it back.
No. I've already moved it twice. Now, they want this guy, Grandpa, to sell his. So they can put up a condominium here with 100 units in it and create 100 new taxpayers and create property taxes so they can build a new school for the children.
Exactly.
How do you feel about that?
My grandpa's crib. Yeah, building somewhere else.
What happened to property rights in this freaking country, man? Come on. All right, I got another one for you. Now, you guys ever been over to Wichita State? You guys been over to Wichita State? Okay. Now, on 21st Street, just on this side of Wichita State, there's a new police substation, a library, a fire station. They're kind of trying to clean that area up, revitalize it. Yes? Well, they were trying to do this in Oakland, California. Now, if you're a business, having a corner lot is good. Yeah? You want lots of interest in it, good visibility, right? It's a great spot to have a business. Okay? Well, this guy had a tire store in Oakland, California. This tire store was built by his grandfather. Grandfather ran it, sold it to his dad. His dad ran it, sold it to his son. 3 generations, tire store on this corner in Oakland, California. They said, well, we're going to clean up this area of Oakland. And they forced him to sell. What did they put there? A Sears.
A Sears.
With a tire store. You guys remember Sears?
Yeah.
Like JCPenney, Sears?
They happen to store.
Yeah, they're dead. Brick and mortar are going away. You guys still like going to the mall?
Yeah.
I like going to the mall. Great place to people watch. Okay? Not as good as the State Fair. Because the State Fair is the ultimate people watching place to go. Walmart's not bad either.
Walmart's fun to watch at like odd hours of the night. Like sometimes I go and get my groceries. Like,
Guys, these are real examples. These are real examples of eminent domain. Okay? And it's the Kelo decision. Yes, ma'am.
My great grandpa lived like where Cheney Lake is.
They did.
Did he
So
get?
When they built the lake or
When they were like, yeah.
constructing it?
Yeah, my great grandparents. Cheating the crime.
Okay.
Not there.
My grandpa said to me from the airport.
They were over there? Okay.
My great grandparents.
Boy, we've got some real hand experiences here. Okay, now. How much time I got? All right, come on, let's go. This you need to know for the test. Now, there is a matching section on the test where you're going to be able to use A and B multiple times. A is going to be House. B is going to be Senate. So you got to match that with the power. So powers that are unique to the House include anytime they're going to spend your money or tax you, that legislation has to start in the House of Representatives. Just like they did in the colonies. They control the purse, okay? Only the House elects the president if there's no majority in the Electoral College. Have we talked about this? Huh? This has happened twice. In 1801, Thomas Jefferson was elected by the House of Representatives. In 1825, John Quincy Adams was elected by the House of Representatives. Now, quick version here. There's 538 Electoral College votes, correct? That includes DC. You cut that in half, you get 269. Yes? 270 is the magic number. If there's a 269 to 269 tie, nobody wins the majority. If you have a strong third party that wins, say, 100 Electoral College votes and nobody gets to 270, the House of Representatives elects the president. Now, this is how it works. Kansas has 4 members of the House, yes? 3 of them are of which party? 1 vote. First state, Kansas, Trump. California has 52 members of the House, most of them of which party? Democrats. 1 vote, California, Biden. And that's how it goes. North Dakota, they got 1 member of the House, the Republican. 1 vote, North Dakota, Trump, and so on. How many states do you have to win?
26.
26. If nobody wins 26 and you're stuck at a deadlock 25-25, what happens then, Mr. Ebright? Well, the outgoing vice president, i.e. Kamala Harris, becomes president until they break the tie. Now, the Senate used to elect the vice president if there was a tie for second place. But we don't do that anymore because of what amendment? 12th Amendment.
The 12th one.
Changed that. So it's in the Constitution. We just don't use it anymore. Okay? All right. The Senate, not the House, must approve treaties. The Senate approves presidential nominations, ambassadors, judges, cabinet members, consuls, and so forth. Heads of some executive agencies like the CIA, the FBI. Appointed by the president, approved by the Senate. Not Congress, the Senate. Yes? This is called the advise and consent power. I've got more. To amend the Constitution, you need 2/3 of both houses. All 27 amendments have been proposed that way. It's both houses. Impeachment. Have we talked about impeachment? Yeah. Okay. I will start with impeachment tomorrow. Tomorrow is what, Thursday? I got 2 days to get through how a bill becomes a law. So bring your books, because we'll go through it in your books. Okay? Good? What's that? Next week.